the building is burning, and these two Iranian intelligence guys run up to me and the sort of little group, there's about 10 of us, and they're like, Khanoume Marriott, Miss Marriott. And I'm like, yes. And they're like, you're in danger. I'm like, no shit, Sherlock. So growing up, I don't think I knew what a diplomat was or did, or even that there was such a thing as the Foreign Office. But I do remember vividly at the age of 13 watching a BBC reporter called Kate Adie reporting from the massacre in Tiananmen Square in China. And I think for a lot of women in their 40s, there was just a moment of, oh my goodness, women can do that sort of thing. So that really piqued my interest in foreign issues, everything that happened overseas. And then that led to me being interested in journalism, and particularly correspondence, and I dabbled in journalism for a bit and got some internships on the Times and the Observer. But then there was a certain point where I thought it's interesting to report on the news, but actually I think I want to be behind the scenes making the news. So back in 2003, there was a huge debate, including within the Foreign Office, which I was working in at the time, about the war with Iraq. But I have to say, once it happened, I'm very much a roll your sleeves up and see what you can do. So I volunteered to go out with the Foreign Office to Iraq, and it's quite often the case with personnel issues. The paperwork didn't work out, and the Ministry of Defence rang me up and went, "We hear you're stupid enough to go to Iraq. Do you want to go to Maysan and be a POLAD?" And I'm like, yes, absolutely. I just have two questions. Where's Maysan and what's a POLAD? And Maysan turned out to be a province halfway between Basra and Baghdad, and a POLAD turned out to be a political advisor. So I was the only civilian and one of only about 5 or 6 women attached to a 1,200 strong British military camp. So when the chief of police was assassinated, I kind of immediately went in and started negotiating between the tribes in Iraq to stop it going up into a major conflagration. I'm only 27, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm trying my best. And actually the guy who was semi-elected at the end of this was one of the first chiefs of police not to leave in a body bag, and was a very successful chief who lasted many years in the role. I didn't know what to imagine as life as a diplomat. I think if I'd heard anything, I would have imagined, sort of eating pastries in a nice cafe in Paris whilst talking to my opposite number and planning world domination or something. And the reality actually for me has been much more harder posting. So Iraq twice, Afghanistan, Iran, Yemen, evacuating embassies 3 times. So every time I think, life is calm, life is good, it throws a curveball my way.
How does it feel to have to tell your parents that you're going to Iraq when war has just broken out? And what was that conversation like?
So back in 2003 in the Foreign Office, I was working on nuclear weapons issues, and I'd been headhunted by an organisation in Vienna to go and work for them. And I was in 2 minds about it, but particularly because my dad was just horrified about the idea of me moving to Vienna. He'd started to persuade himself that perhaps it was okay, and I rang him up one day and I said, Dad, can I speak to Mum? And in unusual assertiveness, my dad went, "Whatever it is, you can tell me." And I said, "Well, I'm not going to Vienna anymore." Oh, thank goodness, he says. Then he pauses. "Why? Where are you going?" he says. And I said, "I'm actually going to Iraq, Dad, and I leave in about 10 days' time." And I just heard the phone drop and this voice go, Pat, come and talk to your daughter." So yeah, I've given them a lot of heartache over the years, I think, with all of my travels and jobs.
Can you tell us about the first evacuation in Iran? What was the atmosphere like in the days building up to the conflict? And then, of course, there was a 300-person mob outside, I understand. Can you tell us about the sights and the sounds and the feelings of that experience?
So back in 2011, I'd been the deputy ambassador and then the acting ambassador in Tehran in Iran for, I've been there nearly 2 years at that point. And There's always tensions between the two countries, not as bad perhaps as they've been since, but there was a sort of pressure building up. And on the anniversary of the assassination of an Iranian nuclear scientist, there was a big demonstration outside the UK embassy. We'd had demonstrations before, but this one felt a bit different, mainly because you start to get a sixth sense in when you work in different countries. So the riot police weren't quite there. The truck that normally came in to bring the stones that people would then throw at the walls wasn't in the right place. The numbers seemed to be larger than normal. It's probably about 1,000 or so outside the embassy in the end. And so we'd done all of our preparations. I was in charge as the deputy ambassador of all of those preparations. Demonstrations started as normal, so somebody sort of stood up and said, death to the UK, death to America, death to Israel, as they always said. Bit of chanting, bit of stone throwing, but then suddenly I saw this guy appear on the wall. So it's very high walls, lots of barbed wire, and this guy gets on top of the wall, puts something on to dampen down the barbed wire, and then people start coming in over the wall. They get to the security gate and then open the door, and then a mob of about 300 pour through the gates at the site we were on, but also in a similar way at the other site where many of our families were. And what ensued was essentially about a sort of 12-hour standoff and semi-hostage situation. So the building we were in was set on fire. We eventually kind of had to flee that building. I'm working the phones, sort of trying to negotiate with the different bits of the Iranian authorities. I've got the French with cars waiting outside to whisk us to safety, but we can't reach the cars because there's a mob between us. In between sort of trying to negotiate with all the different Iranians, I was sort of giving my mum a quick call to go, yeah, no, absolutely fine. Yeah, no, there's quite a bit of stuff going on, but it's all going to be fine, Mum. And then sort of ringing the Iranian President's office going, you need to get some people down here to protect us. Eventually I managed to get hold of some Iranian sort of intelligence types, and they actually took us off to an area that wasn't entirely safe, but was safer than standing in the open. And after about sort of 8 hours, the mob finally dispersed. I don't think they wanted to kill us, but I think it could have happened accidentally. So Iran was meant to be a nice quiet posting. It clearly wasn't. And about a year later, I was posted as the ambassador, my first full ambassadorial posting to Yemen. And about 3 weeks after I arrived, there was a very large Al-Qaeda splinter group called Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula that operated out of Yemen, direct threats against our embassy and against the American embassy. And so London, our headquarters, were like, okay, you're going to have to evacuate. I was like, oh no, not again. So I kind of looked at the threat, looked at the mitigations that we got at post, and I sort of called my boss and said, look, I know you guys manage the risk from back there, but this place looks like a forward operating base in Afghanistan. I've got, Hesco Bastion, I've got sandbags everywhere. I've got general purpose machine guns on the roof. I've got 30 guys, surrounding it. I've got guys on the roof. I've got checkpoints that I've put up around the embassy. We can take a hit from Al-Qaeda. We can fight back and we will win. And he went, the evacuation plane leaves tomorrow, Jane. So I've been High Commissioner in Pakistan since July 2023, and it's been one of those amazing years where it feels that it's gone by in about 2 minutes, but I also feel as though I've been there longer as well. I think when I first was told I was going to Pakistan, I went to a bookshop, went to the shelf P for Pakistan, and it was all books about terrorism, and I couldn't even find a travel guide. But that is such a small part of Pakistan, not exclusively in its history, but what I'd love to see is for people to see the multiculturalism of Pakistan, the fact that there are more Buddhist and Hindu shrines in Rawalpindi than there are mosques, the fact you have the most amazing mountains where women play a very, very active role in society, the food and street culture in Lahore and Karachi. Bit too spicy for my taste, but I'm trying to adapt, and but I regularly end up going for things that are too hot and slightly regretting it. And the thing I love about being a diplomat, but particularly once you're an ambassador, is the huge variety that you get in your working day. So I have teams that work on climate change, on health, on education, on security, counter-terrorism, migration, and so any given day can encompass all of those. My My favourite way is sort of from 8 till 9, I'll check the emails while having a breakfast. Sometimes it's a working breakfast instead, and then go into, perhaps launching something new with the government of Pakistan on how we're measuring success on education, for example, or having a conversation with the Prime Minister about economic development. In the afternoon, I might be seeing the Interior Minister to talk about migration and returns. And then in the evening, I'm probably hosting a variety of political actors to talk about issues maybe around local government or about UK-Pakistan relations or regional relations. So you definitely need somebody who can turn their attention to many things simultaneously. I think one of the things that would surprise most people about being a diplomat, and it certainly surprised me, was I thought it would be sort of full of posh Whitey-Tonian boys. And it was a bit like that when I first joined. But nowadays we're an incredibly diverse office. We're diverse in terms of social mobility, in terms of characteristics, in terms of thought. So everybody is welcome, and more people than I think they may think could have a great career in the Foreign Office, and I would wholeheartedly recommend it. So I think when I first started out as a diplomat, as I say, I didn't really know what to imagine, but I don't think I would have thought that I would have got here to my 40s and I would have worked in Iraq. Then I went to Afghanistan. Then I went back to Iraq. Then I was in London for a while. Then I headed off to the US, worked for General Petraeus when he was the CENTCOM chief, and then I went to work for a guy called Richard Holbrooke in the US State Department, so in the beating heart of the US system. Then went off to Iran, then went off to Yemen, Kenya, and now Pakistan, with stints in London in between. And I have to say, sometimes I look at my life and I kind of go, pinch me, I had no idea that there were lives like this, and it's just been an amazing ride so far.